My name is Susan Wingrove-Reed, and I am the education consultant for the Anchorage Symphony and the principal keyboard player. And it is so good to be back at the Atwood playing with my colleagues on stage with our music advisor, Elizabeth Schulze. And this afternoon, we are doing something a little bit COVID safe friendly for our audience, in that we're going to have a pre-concert chat version that will be sent out over technology to keep us safer, so that those who come to the concert Saturday night or live stream it are going to be safe wherever you are. So Elizabeth, we're so happy to have you with us and to finally be back on stage after over 18 months of not being together as an orchestra. And we're so grateful that you have had a past relationship with our beloved music director, Randy Fleischer. And so let's talk a little bit first about welcome from the Maryland Symphony. Where is your other job? And you're here to help us through the search period and keep us playing music all this season, etc. So what was it like to be in the Atwood a week ago Monday with the ASO, who you've been with us before? So tell us about that.
Yes. First of all, it's fabulous to be with you, Susan. And congratulations to you for a whole year of magnificent videos, which I enjoyed watching your performances on our website, on the ASO website. Just spectacular. You and your colleagues in the orchestra were real troopers to just keep going and finding amazing repertoire and playing at such a beautiful high level. It was, I think it was for all of us a true gift. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much.
And it was a thrill to get back onto the Atwood stage. I hadn't been there since 2015. I wish it were for a different reason. Randy was indeed a beloved colleague and an immense, gifted, charismatic soul, and we miss him deeply. And the first thing we did was to play his music to bring him to us again, because as all great composers, they speak to us over the ages. And now Randy's voice continues in his music. And so, of course, we will start off our concert after our anthems. We will bring his Yupik song from his Echoes to the stage again, and he will be with us in more than spirit, in his music, in his thoughts, in his soul. It's actually, I think, pretty profound to have him with us like that.
I think all of us in the orchestra thank you for this programming, and that the first we played was Randy's music. It was very emotional, and
yes.
And it was very necessary. It brought us together in a way that only music can, and brought him alive to us. And we're so happy to present this with you. And as you said, you shared that, yeah, you're likely the first person that's ever conducted his music like this, other than himself.
That piece at least, because I believe he pretty much had been the sole conductor of that work, of you know, in all the performances of it. And so it was daunting to know that I was going to be the successor on so many levels and in this work as well. So I know we will do justice to it, because everyone in the orchestra knows it like the back of their hand. It's been programmed many times, and we will have such wonderful guests on stage to dance and sing and play. So it's going to be, I believe it will be a very fitting tribute to someone who has, we feel his loss tremendously.
Yes, and thank you. So we have this really amazing program, and after we experience the traditional opening of a regular season with the anthems, as you said, and then Randy's Echoes, you selected works by a really interesting range of composers for our reopening night, beginning with the Hailstork celebration.
Yes.
And this piece is just, well, I'll let you describe it and why you chose it as our overture for this first concert back.
It was written to celebrate the bicentennial of our country, and therefore he had in mind the American spirit. What was America in the 1970s, 1976. And it, to me, really brings together multiculturalism. You hear it in dance rhythms of different cultures, Latin sounds, African sounds, jazz, just all kinds of, and football fields, marching bands, Charles Ives kind of feeling sometimes when the piece goes to a moment of chaos and then rights itself again. It's awesome. It's such a great, boisterous, ebullient, exuberant expression of the American spirit. And it just seemed to me really appropriate for us to be coming back from silence on some level, certainly for the whole orchestra on the Atwood stage, but for a lot of people, a sort of muted life for a while. And this is not muted. This is all out there.
The brass are going to earn their paycheck for sure.
Indeed, they are. And you have to count like mad, the whole thing. It's a mixed meter kind of thing, and I love the music of Adolphus Hailstork because he uses modern materials, modern harmonic language, but it is always in service of speaking directly to the audience. And it is, I hate the word accessible, except it is. He's speaking to us. He wants to be in conversation with the listener. And therefore, he knows how to engage very well.
And well chosen too, because as many people refer to him as the dean of African American composers in America, and this is his 80th birthday year, and he's writing. And so, birthday to Professor Hailstork. And I'm really proud that we're presenting this on this occasion in his life. So, thank you. Another gem on this program of gems is a feature of a Beethoven romance with soloist is our own concertmaster, Kathryn Hoffer. And it's just, I love the variety on this program. What led you and Kathryn to choose the Beethoven, and what are you enjoying about it?
She chose which of the two romances. I suggested romances because, Beethoven, we missed his, what was it, 250th. The pandemic took that huge celebration that was going to happen, I'm sure, across the world. We were going to be saturated in Beethoven's symphonies and major works, concerti and things like that. But we forget sometimes about the performer and the elegant performer that he was at the turn of the 18th into the 19th century. He was a dandy. He played the violin, so perhaps he wrote them for himself. I don't know. I think he either wrote them for a concertmaster that he knew, or possibly himself. He was more a pianist, of course. We know him that way. Well, I didn't know him, but they knew him that way. But they're elegant, they're beautiful, and it's all about melody, and it's all about a more gentle conversation than we are used to. It's not the profound adagios that make you, sit in your chair and ponder and look at deep thoughts. This is about elegance and beauty and balance. It's more classical in some ways in its outlook, elegant, and it, to me, fits Kathryn to a T. She is an elegant, magnificent musician, and this piece will come directly from her heart, as Beethoven always meant his music to, from the heart to the heart. I am looking forward to this collaboration, and it is an honor to work with her.
Oh, she's quite a gem in our music community in so many ways. And I was lucky enough, she conned me into playing through it with her last Friday. I played section in my home, and just hearing her play here with me, and just, again, how elegant and delicate and musical she is. It was just, our audience is in for a real treat. So,
indeed.
Then, we have to talk about Marquez for a minute. Danzón number 2, which is just such a gas to play as an orchestra member, and it's so wonderful for audiences to hear. What led you to choose the Marquez for our opening night?
Oh, it's so sexy, isn't it? It's sexy music. It's and yet it is very precise. It demands a certain kind of precision, because the danzón itself has steps. that have to be taken. And it's fascinating. I mean, a perusal of YouTube Danzón's tradition has been very eye-opening. And this is something that captured Marquez's imagination. He himself knows the dance very well and participated in dance clubs. And what I love is that it can be very intimate between two people, and yet it can also be a big spectacle where everyone is dancing in a town square. You can find that both styles, both experiences, events in this piece of music, which has intimacy with solo instruments, the piano and the clarinet or the piccolo, and then it breaks out into not a bacchanal, and that's the most important thing. It's not a free-for-all kind of piece. It's not something that you are on the verge of stepping over the line. You hew to the line, and because of that, it gets your blood boiling in the best way possible. So I just think it's a remarkable dance. It's a remarkable evocation of something that is important in his life and is important in the social life of his culture.
Mm-hmm. And then, wow, more wonder to come is Dvorak's amazing Eighth Symphony, which is a really unique piece in his repertoire. And it's, from what I'm hearing from my colleagues, since there's no piano part, of course, but everyone is just really enjoying the adventure of getting to experience it with you. So what about the Dvorak is unique to you that you would like the audience to hear about before Saturday night?
Well, I have been thinking about this piece all my life because it is, I don't know if it's my absolute favorite of his symphonies, because I've performed 5, 6, 7, and 8, 9 all my life throughout my career. I love them all for different reasons. And 8 is very special to me because it is characterized as the most Czech of his, his great 3, 7, 8, and 9 are considered the great symphonies. I would argue 6 is in there too, but anyway, because of the use of evoking folk song and folk rhythms and dances and things from his culture. And I agree, and also nature, sounds of nature, hearkening back to models set up by Beethoven, and even before that, of course, Haydn and others. But pastoral symphony comes forth, even aspects of the heroic fanfares like in Beethoven's 5th and 9th, and the dance in the 7th. So we know that Dvorak loved Beethoven and used Beethoven's symphonies as models, but he's beyond that now. And I think for himself as an artist, as someone who is modeling off of someone else, I think he is creating something quite new. And he said this about this, that he felt that he was going in a new direction with this symphony. And I think part of what he might have meant was that he had come into his own as an artist of the highest level. And he was confident in expressing a sound world that he was experiencing in his time. Mm-hmm. Because of scholarship over decades now, we know so much more about Dvorak than the simple backwater bohemian composer that Brahms sort of looked down on as a little brother and patted his head and said, "Good job, but you need to move to the great city of Vienna to be polished off and to become a real artist." We know that kind of there's a kind of bias, prejudice in that, cultural prejudice perhaps. And I grew up hearing from my musicology professors about how Dvorak was, old-fashioned and repetitive, and the fact that that people actually loved to play his music, and also Tchaikovsky. They were all put in this bundle of late 19th century pretty composers. And that, of course, is a terrible disservice to this magnificent composer named Antonin Dvorak, who was a modern man, who was absolutely living in a world of industry. The second industrial age was happening when this symphony was being written. The electrification of cities was happening. The trains were going 100 miles an hour, in America. When he was to come to America a few years later, after he wrote this symphony, he was fascinated with trains and would go down to the train station to just watch the powerful engines. And that's why the Ninth Symphony is so strong and powerful, because he's experiencing a country, in a new, not maybe a rebirth in a way, an exciting time for it, but also in Europe, sophistication of technology was happening. Of course it was. And if he were living today, maybe he'd be a computer programmer, or he'd be Steve Jobs or heading up Microsoft. Who knows? He was a genius and he loved the latest gadgets and he owned them. And that didn't mean that he didn't take his pail of beer out into the forest and listen to the birds. He did all of those things, just as we go down to the coastal trail and walk.
Right.
He took it all in. And it was a time when nature was starting to be harnessed for the better, for agriculture, transportation, communication. The power of nature was going into the laboratory and being used to help all of mankind. And he was aware of all of this. I think in this symphony, we hear a little bit of this. I think certainly in the first movement, it can be seen as, and I don't disagree that it in some ways is a picture of life coming, the sun rising and the birds singing and a hymn of thanks and all of those things that people see in this symphony at the very beginning. It reminds me a little bit of the opening of Mahler's First Symphony, which is also about the creation of life, the beginning of the day. But if you listen carefully, there's a lot of minor in this G major symphony. And it's not only to bring contrast, but I think it is to express a certain amount of melancholy over the loss. I mean, look at the first, the cello line at the very beginning, which he supposedly added later. It was supposed to, I guess, start with just the bird call of the flute solo. But then he added this beautiful melancholy kind of yearning song that the cellos sing literally at the very beginning. And then it forms the height of a storm scene or of the climactic moment later on in the first movement. So but there is an aspect rhythmically that is motoric, and I can't help but think that it has to do with, I'm not saying it is trains, but there is an idea of momentum, of energy, and of something that is fighting nature in some ways or controlling nature. And that can be the aspect of music in general, taking nature and bringing it to a higher level that speaks to all. As Beethoven would do in the Pastoral Symphony. In some ways, this is happening in Dvorak as well. He's trying to lift up the experience of nature. But I also think that he is giving us a sound of what's going on in the city, in towns, the train going through town, or the coaches, or the whatever was the latest mode. He is reflecting his time. The middle movements are all about the virtuosity of the orchestra, the ability to evoke the fairy tale in the second movement. He was a master of fairy tale, very much like Tchaikovsky, but he used it in tone poems. Well, so did Tchaikovsky, but he used it in his tone poems about fairy tales that were of his culture. The Wood Dove and the Noon Witch and the other tone poems later, post-symphonic writing of his had a lot to do with fairy tale. And of course, he was a magnificent opera composer as well. So I mean, Rusalka is all about fairy tale in some ways too. So I think he uses his imagination in the second movement to create maybe a night scene or some kind of fairy tale, some kind of mysterious night scene, perhaps, in the second movement. The third movement is both elegant and rustic, but calls upon the virtuosity of the orchestra. He's writing for an instrument that is at the top of its game. In the late 1880s, 1890s, the symphony orchestra was the greatest musical, arguably the piano, of course, but for a team effort, the orchestra was really a phenomenon, and also a sign of the highest cultural attainment of a community to have a symphony orchestra. And he was writing for the very best. In this case, he took it to England. This symphony was premiered in England, partly because of publisher fights. You know, he didn't get enough money from his regular publisher, so someone in England paid him more, so they got the rights for the first performance. And that tells you something about this man too, because he's a commercial. He's thinking about the commercial aspect of what is publicly appealing. And so characteristic movements inside, things that show off the orchestra, but also show off his ability to create character pieces, pieces that evoke a story or place you in a certain milieu. That's how strong he is as a composer. And then the last movement, fanfare, something that he would have heard, not only growing up, but the military aspect of Europe at that time. I mean, there was a war every 5 years. There was some kind of boundary battle or something going on. So military was around all the time. Although there is I can't remember the name of the famous conductor who said something about, in the Czech world, you hear a fanfare, it's not calling you to war, it's calling you to the dance. And there's no question that in this case, just, this is not going to be a war, because the first thing you hear is a very simple tune that is going to go through a whole theme and variations. Kind of a la Brahms's Fourth Symphony in some ways, but, Dvorak was a wonderful, his variations for orchestra are spectacular, and he knew exactly how to weave a journey of a simple melody into something that ends up being breathtaking by the end. So this is a modern man writing of his time, giving us sound worlds that depict what he's hearing, what he's experiencing. And the idea of him being some sort of simpleton who had a Mozartian ability to write pretty melodies is just old-fashioned now. That's not, the idea of him that is truly naive and underestimates him and doesn't give him the acknowledgement of his sophistication and his genius that he deserves.
Well, your enthusiasm is just radiating over the Zoom screen here. And I know our audience is going to be just entranced to hear our orchestra again under your baton, taking us through a journey that will be very memorable for so many people in our community and our musicians on Saturday. So thank you for sharing your insights and your excitement and your passion. Look forward to seeing you on stage Saturday night, and on to lots of safe musical journeys ahead. May our audiences and our orchestra stay safe, and carry Symphony on, as Sherry has said, as our manager.
Absolutely.
And many thanks to Sherry and the staff of the Symphony for keeping our orchestra alive and bringing us together again. So,
and thanks to all of you who are listening and watching. Your support means everything to us. And thank you, Susan, for symphonying on.